who's interested in learning the concertos or concerti of Rachmaninoff, I highly suggest looking at his preludes and etudes because they have these mini examples of the type of technique and the type of writing that you experience in the concerto in just a condensed form. For instance, this piece is made up of a few different sections. This opening section, the part where the chords come in, this is a variation on the initial theme. Then you have this run, which goes back into a recap of the first section. It's much shorter, much easier to process, but it's still not easy. It has a lot of its own challenges, but it's a lot more doable than trying to take on a concerto. And once you have worked on several of these, you kind of get a feel for his style. The B-flat prelude, in contrast, has these huge bell-like sounds and a wash of pedal. He loved bells. And so I think that's exemplified in this piece as well as any other piece.
There's no question it's a work in progress.
Whenever you have segments like this that have this large bell-like sound, especially with people like Rachmaninoff, pedaling is not always the most intuitive thing. And I remember a story that my Russian teacher told me about the opening of the second piano concerto, this super famous opening, and people always asked her how she got such a big sound out of it. And her answer was pretty simple. She didn't let go of the pedal through the entire opening line.
Pedal harder.
Now, immediately, those who know anything about pedaling will come to the assumption that it will make everything blurry. But when you know how to space things out and when you have a prominent enough bass and a prominent enough melody line, it actually doesn't sound blurry, especially not from the audience. I know you can't really hear the full context because I'm just recording on my phone. But it really makes a big difference because every time you lift the pedal, you're cutting off that sound and all these overtones that are building up inside the pedal. So areas like this, you can pedal a lot more than other composers, like earlier composers like Beethoven or even Chopin. So the other two pieces I'm going to be playing are the G minor prelude, number 5, and also the etude-tableaux in D minor, opus 39, number 8. And I recently uploaded a version that I played 10 years ago. It's on my channel. You can listen to that. So I'm going to be trying to record these 4 pieces in one session pretty soon, hopefully within a month or so. At least that's the plan. And it'll be interesting to see how I've changed in my interpretation of the D minor etude over the years. Memory is a very strange thing, especially when it comes to music. You guys have probably seen some stories of older people who get Alzheimer's and can't remember, who people are, can't remember anything about their past, and yet they remember how to play music? Well, when it comes to memory of pieces, the unfortunate part of that is that when you come back to a piece that you haven't played in a long time, the places that you struggle with come back just as strong. So these areas that I circled in red, even though it's been over half a year, as I'm bringing it back, I'm struggling in exactly the same areas.
We just keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again.
I guess the moral of the story is when you learn a piece, you want to learn it as well as possible the first time around. But yeah, at least I have these marked out so I know what to focus on. Also, as a quick little side note, the opening of the third movement is notoriously difficult in this left-hand passage. This particular transition is very uncomfortable. My hands are barely big enough, but getting from here to there is quite a trick. If your hands are smaller, a lot of people do this, which makes it easier. If you can't do it, you can't do it. Definitely try. I guess that's the compromise, because he had such huge hands. I was talking about pedal earlier, and there's another part where the pedaling is somewhat counterintuitive, this area. So typically you would pedal with the harmonic changes. Which would be with the left hand. In this case, I've chosen to pedal with the melody. Partly because of the register, everything is higher. So you don't have the same problem of it getting very muddy. The lower you get, the muddier it can become. So even though I'm pedaling through this, especially faster, oh gosh, you can see I need work. But the idea is to hear that melody tracking through. This section and the times that it comes back in its various reiterations was one of my least favorite parts. It's just so uncomfortable, and there's just so much going on. But this is a place where you really do want to track those inner voices. Obviously, everybody knows slow practice is good. But in addition to slow practicing, you want to hear those moving voices. So there are notes that stay the same. These inner notes stay the same. So you don't want to bring those out. You want to bring out the moving lines. And the same in the left hand. And in addition to that, you also want to bring out certain things that, like that, the dissonances. Sometimes we want to stray away from them, but they actually bring some of the character. And we're back. And some of the parts he's very specific, where he wants the thumb to be brought out. There's another little dissonance there. It's a dissonance. And as you're jumping, you don't want to lose sight of the line. So you would really need multiple hands to do this, but you want to be able to hear that descending chromaticism. My professor gave me some really good dynamic advice in this section. It can tend to run on and sound like it's not going anywhere. So here he recommended that I dip down and again dipping down here. And it works quite well. And here again is a big diminuendo down to mezzo forte. As you're going through, there's just so much notes going on. It's very, very easy and very tempting to just play and hack away at the piano, and it can very quickly sound monotone and there's no direction. Also, in doing these different diminuendos that I put here, here, and here, it makes the peak of the phrase much more substantial. And here I wrote to keep sound because I guess I was wanting to just naturally decrescendo here, although Rachmaninoff doesn't write it until there. So you can actually make a peak of the phrase sound much more of an arrival point.
We have arrived.
And then we get into the scherzando section, which is, I love and I hate it. It's, once you get it down, it's actually quite fun to play. This is one of those sections where you just have to count. It's also a little bit deceptive because of what happens in the accompaniment. So it seems like it's a consistent pattern throughout, and then it just changes and it goes to something else, and then he throws a 3-2 bar in there. And during the meantime, this piano part doesn't necessarily line up with anything else. As you can see, I've written in where all the major beats lie, because I just had to count like mad in this section.
Well, I don't know how to count. I have to solve the problem.
See, there it is right there. 6 months later, I still stumble on this section. So I would probably go through, maybe this is a place where I need to change the fingering, or maybe it's just a place where I need to go slowly, counting out loud, taking it hands apart. I also think I didn't pedal through those 30 seconds. Let me try that one more time. There you go. I kind of want that. Another cool little tip from my teacher, if anyone is crazy enough to play this, it has to do with a few instances, and this is one of them, where this chord, you have these octaves, right? So the melody is in the octave. And what he writes is this. This always ended up sounding weak, so what was recommended to me is to do this. So it's like you're just playing the G sharp minor chord and actually play an octave. You can do it again right here, and you can do it again there. It just makes everything sound much fuller, because then you have voice leading from each of those octaves. And again here, rather than, it just sounds so weak. And finally at the end of the entire phrase. So get a much bigger sound that way. All right, so I essentially covered just about the first half of the third movement, maybe a little bit less than the first half of the third movement. I'm going to come back and do another vlog on the second half. As you guys can see, it's quite rusty. I don't have a date for next performance, so there's no real deadline and goal that I'm working towards. I'm kind of taking my time and working on it, not even every day, just as I go. But I'm trying to pinpoint these areas, and hopefully they'll get better.